It's time to tackle the big one. How to improve your handwriting. I received a lot of requests of people who said they loved my handwriting and they wanted me to do a video on how to improve your handwriting. Well, first of all, I am deeply honored, but I am not a handwriting expert and I am not a master calligrapher, nor do I claim to be that. Having said that, I can give you a few pointers. Believe it or not, but in primary school, I was scolded for my handwriting continuously. We learned how to write using a pencil, then we moved on to a school-supplied fountain pen, and then most kids at some point move on to rollerballs or ballpoints. And my handwriting was always terrible. It was illegible. It was really, really bad. And one thing I can say now, even if I don't have the world's greatest cursive, I think anyone who tries to can actually read my handwriting. So, how did I get to that point? What we're going to do today is just talk, and then I'll do a second video where I actually show you a couple of things you could try if you want to work in your handwriting. I have done a video on writing and calligraphy in the past, where I sort of discussed similar topics, but I think it's good to revise that and put this out there. Okay, enough talk. What can you do to improve your handwriting? Let's go to the beef of this video. Well, first of all, you can have no illusions. You can buy a $900 fountain pen, but I'll tell you a secret. It's not going to do anything for your handwriting. So don't think that if you buy a super expensive pen, your handwriting will suddenly magically improve. Yes, it will do specific things, especially fountain pen. It allows you to write, it forces you to write a bit slower typically, especially when you begin. It forces you to turn the nib correctly, so you will have to be more active, think actively about what you are doing as you write, and that can help. But the pen itself is not going to do anything. It's the same as copperplate. You can buy a flex pen, but that won't give you beautiful copperplate calligraphy. So here's rule number one. If you want to improve your handwriting, it's going to take elbow grease. Buckets and buckets of it. You're going to have to exercise. If you want to run a marathon, you won't suddenly get into great shape by sitting on the sofa and thinking about marathons. The only thing that will work is getting out, putting your shoes on, and running. Same thing with writing. If you want to improve your handwriting, get a pen, and get a good pen. That can be a $20 Lamy Safari. It can also be an $800, $900 pen. It doesn't matter. Take a pen that you're comfortable with. A pen that has a nib size that suits you. I'll come back to that in a second. A pen that has good flow. A pen that takes good ink, which is pretty much every fountain pen, so that's easy. Sit down, take yourself some paper, and write. Write, write. A good thing to consider first is the nib size. I get this question a lot. What nib size do I use? Okay, there are 4 basic nib grades: extra fine, fine, medium, and broad. And then you have double broad and triple broad on some brands like Pelican. And then on some brands you have obliques and you have italics. And then you have stubs. You have cursive italics, crisp italics. You have all kinds of nibs. Forget about that. If you're starting out with a fountain pen to improve your handwriting, I would say get a round nib, so a standard nib. I have a special video, a separate video on specialty nibs, where I discuss the difference between italics, calligraphy pens, obliques, etc. I'm not going to go into that right now. I think the advantage of a round nib, so a regular fountain pen nib, is that it will write in quite some more angles than, for example, an italic pen would. So that's nice to start. On the other hand, an italic pen will give you some line variation, which gives a bit of a calligraphic effect, which is a very nice and fast way to work in your handwriting. So you could consider that. However, an italic pen takes a bit of getting used to. You have to angle it in specific manners to make it write properly. I'm going to take a sip of water, guys. I've been talking a lot. It's actually vodka. Now, not really. That's the first part. So get a nib. Now the second question is, and that's one that I get a lot, what nib size do I need? Do I need extra fine or broad or what? Take the nib size that matches your handwriting. The only way to find out when you're going to buy your first pen is to try them. Try extra fine, fine, medium, broad. Many people who use Asian scripts, say in China or Japan, like extra fine or fine nibs because it allows to make characters in small spaces. If you have very small handwriting, you'll need an extra fine or a fine. If you're like me, you have fairly roomy handwriting, you'll probably benefit from a broad. Here's a simple tip when you're in a shop. I got this from Peter Twile's excellent book called Fountain Pens. His parents used to have a fountain pen store, and they used the following very simple trick to see what nib grade someone needed. You take a pen in hand and you write the lowercase e, the letter E. If the little bowl of the letter, that part, is filled with ink, then the nib grade is too big and you need to get a grade lower. So if with a medium your E is filled, you need to get a fine. If it's filled with a fine, you need to get an extra fine. If it's filled with an extra fine, you need to buy a microscope because then your handwriting is extremely small. But do something like that. A simple test, um, and again, get a pen that's comfortable for you. I know we buy a lot of pens online, but especially if it's your first pen, I really would recommend going to a brick and mortar store and trying out a range of nib grades. Alright, if you've got the pen that's good for you, get a decent ink. If you have a super wet ink, you may smear it, so go for a standard ink. Florida Blue, now called Serenity, from Waterman, an excellent blue ink, will serve you well. Pretty big bottle, you can use it a lot. If you don't want that, get cartridges, that's fine too, doesn't really matter. Then get yourself some decent paper. If you have super cheap paper that feathers a lot, then it's not really going to work either, so get decent paper, Rhodia, something like that. You can even use copier paper. It's not really a big deal because you're not doing beautiful calligraphy, you're just practicing. Okay, a good way to practice is to find an example that you like and then try to emulate that handwriting. What I did was, on Windows PCs you have a font called Künstler script, or actually I should say Künstler script because it doesn't have an umlaut. That is a copperplate script. Now, you're not going to write like that on an everyday basis, but it has a good idea of letter shapes. It gives you a good idea. So once you've had step one, which is select a correct pen and correct nib size for you, get something to emulate. It could also be my handwriting. I really don't see the appeal of my handwriting, but some people like that. That's fine. Check out my video. I write the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog in every video because that's a pangram. That contains all the letters of the alphabet. So if you use a sentence like that, with just one sentence, you can write every letter of the alphabet. And if you're doing cursive, you can also practice connecting the letters. And that's a bit nicer than just going A. However, when you start out, there's nothing wrong with just repeating letters. Write 10 pages of A's. Once you've done that, you've got the letter pretty much pinned down. Look at what you're doing. That's a very important step in practicing anything. Reflect on your own behavior. If you think your A is too big or not slanted enough or too slanted or whatever, adjust it. You can adjust it. It's not difficult. All you need to do is be consistent. Just practice it again. Practice it again. Make your A's. Make all your A's connect. A very nice word to write, if you want to see if your handwriting is good, is the word minimum. Try writing that in cursive. Minimum. You get a lot of these sort of loopy things going on. That's a very good one for cursive. So do that. Go through it again and again and again and again until you have a specific letter shape pinned down and you can write it blindly. The third thing, if you want to improve your handwriting, is try for consistency. I don't always do it, but it's a very good thing. If you write your letter F, always write it the same way. If you write your letter A, write it the same way. The more attention you pay to writing all your letters exactly the same, the better your handwriting will look. If your capital A is like that one day, and like that curly another day, it's going to look odd, especially in one letter, right? You have, or whatever document you're writing. You get all these different things, different variations on the same letter. You can also add a bit of playfulness to it, but in a sentence at least, try to keep it consistent, right? So there are various ways to write the letter A, as I'm sure you can imagine. Make it consistent. Practice one shape that you like and practice it well until it's automatism. You can just do it blindly. Another tip that I also give in my writing and calligraphy video is take up calligraphy. Calligraphy is a nice thing, especially if you like pens. It's a nice thing to do. It's something that gives me a lot of pleasure. And there are some really good scripts. For example, the script Foundational. You can just find it online. You can buy a good calligraphy book, but you can also just check it out online. Foundational has a lot of nice letter shapes that are not really good for cursive, but they are pretty good for print, I suppose. But it forces you to look at the letter shapes and to angle the pen exactly the right way. And that's pretty cool. So something like that forces you to slow down and really study the shapes of your letters. So that's another thing that I would really recommend doing. And that's pretty much it. I really think that with a decent pen, and again, that can be a $10 Chinese pen, it can be a $1,000 limited edition, it doesn't matter. Get a good pen. You know I'm a fountain pen guy. I recommend fountain pens for this purpose because they make you slow down a bit, because they make you conscious of what you're doing, because they give a very nice feedback on the paper. Get yourself a good pen. Get yourself a nib that suits your handwriting. Recently someone commented on one of my videos and he went to a fountain pen store and they said, well, you can only use a fine if your handwriting is very good. The worse your handwriting is, the broader the nib. Probably why I like triple broads. But there is some truth in that. It really, with a very fine nib, if you just shake a little bit, you'll really see it, whereas with a broad, you don't. So another consideration. Good pen, good suited nib. Get yourself some paper, get a model to emulate, be it some font on your computer, someone else's handwriting. If you just Google handwriting, you'll see all kinds of examples. Emulate that, and the most important rule of all, practice until your fingers hurt, because that's the only way to improve. There is no shortcuts, there are no tricks, there is nothing you can do to make it easier. Maybe calligraphy will help, but clearly, even though it's fun, it's great if you can write Gothic fractures, but you're not going to do that in daily life. So even calligraphy is not a shortcut, it's just something that helps you study letter shapes. Practice, 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 practice some more, and when you're done, practice. And after that, practice, 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 practice. It's the only thing, all right? And actually, it's not boring at all, because you're working on a very specific thing that you want to improve, that you should be motivated to improve. You can't see a change in 5 minutes, but I promise you, with me, I just went through pages of cursive A's, B's, C's, and after 2 or 3 pages, you see a difference in your own handwriting, and that is extremely rewarding. And one thing I will tell you is, if you have a hand, you can have good handwriting. You really can have something that is at least legible. If I can do it, being scolded in primary school continuously, and now having people tell me online, dude, your handwriting is awesome. I know there are a couple of people who disagree with the beauty of my handwriting. I don't really care. A whole bunch of people have told me that it's nice, they enjoy it, and what's most important, I enjoy it. I look at my handwriting now and I think, that's a lot better than what you had, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So you see your own improvement, and that's very rewarding. Go for it. And finally, here's what I will say. Don't be bothered if anyone tells you your handwriting is poor, because it's yours. It's a part of your character. It's something you've developed as you were a kid. That doesn't mean you can't improve it, but it's your handwriting, and you can take pride in that, even if it's illegible. Having said that, this is the theory part. I think in the second part of this video, we're going to do some writing. Let's see what we can come up with. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Okay, here we have some simple paper from Staples, all I need for this purpose. Here I have a Waldmann Tango pen. Let's see what we can do. I'll show you a couple of my idiosyncrasies. First of all, this final N is actually an uppercase N. I always do that at the end of the word. Notice that my loops are not the same size, so that is a problem. And that's, there's a bunch of things. There's the way this P looks, not entirely perfect. The S is again sort of a capital S. So this is not great handwriting, but this is handwriting that I enjoy. Were I to try and do things a bit more see, my N, that B connection is kind of weird too, by the way. I have problems with the lowercase n, which should look something like that. So the only way I could do this, my little n thing is too long. There we go, that's better. But I kind of liked that n, you see. So you can, that is allowed. You can fiddle around with your own handwriting. Okay, a little bit of exercise. I have literally sat like this for hours. And you see there's quite a difference in my A's. Some are smaller, some are bigger. Try to make them consistent. As consistent as you can make them. Now the thing about personal handwriting is no two letters that you do will always be exactly the same. That's the charm of the handwriting. Okay? So a little bit of foundational. Have fun like this. Now, as I said, if you to test nib size, if your E's look like this is a broad nib, then the pen is too broad for you. For me, they're fine. But, just something to fiddle around with. Now, that was a broad nib. Not the broadest I have, but definitely a broad nib. Now, let's check out this pen. This always has a bit of a startup issue, but it's a different ink color. Here we have a medium, but this is actually a pretty fine medium, I would say. And notice what that does for my handwriting. This is the beautiful Apache Sunset ink by Noodlers. But look at what it does. So here, I'm using no pressure. This is a finer nib, and that makes your handwriting look quite differently from the broad nib. And here I have a Franklin. This was a Delta Titanio, by the way. Here I have a Franklin Christoph Model 02, which is a much broad. Which again gives a whole different feel. That X is very poor. Reflect on yourself. So what I see here is that I need to work on my X's a bit. That's poor. That's better. That's better. That's better. That's okay. That's better. You see, just doing this will show you how to do it. Just keep doing it and you'll get better at some point. Okay, now this is what I wanted to show you. Here I have a 1.1 millimeter italic nib, and with a round fountain pen nib like this, the tip is round, so all these diagonals will have the same diameter because the tip is rounded off. With an italic, it's actually flatter, and many of you who have used fountain pens a lot will know what I'm talking about. But this gives a very natural line variation because it's flat, so these lines are thinner and those lines are broader. Now were you to write with this is a 1.1 millimeter italic on a TWSBI Classic. Your handwriting gets a very interesting look. Because you have that natural line variation, which a lot of people seem to like. So this is good to add some more character. The only problem is if you misalign this nib when you write, you see it skips a lot. Whereas with a round nib, especially a round nib that is a bit wetter, it doesn't really matter how you hold the nib, it's always going to give you at least a bit of a line. Okay, now finally, again, what I really recommend you to do is take up some calligraphy. That forces you to study letter shapes. Here I have a 6 millimeter Pilot Parallel, which I've just inked up, so it's very wet. But the beauty of calligraphy, I do this on purpose. Go with actually not so much a Gothic but an Old English script, and yet I'm using a German word. When people think of calligraphy, I have found that very often, if not always, what they think of is this type of writing, which is understandable because it has, well, a lot going for it. A lot of people like this, like the way this looks. And here again, be critical. Those T's are a bit too tall. That dash should be around there. But you know, I like the way this looks. Now, I will show you another type of calligraphy. I'm just going to remove this sheet. It's very wet, so I'm going to remove that from my writing pad. I'll show you another calligraphy style that I think is two styles that are much more useful. The first is uncial. This is a style that most people associate with Ireland. Little error there. Make this a bit longer. Okay, so we have this. So that's going. Okay, now this, as I'm sure you will see, the uncial style is much closer to our everyday handwriting. Right? It is closer to writing a grocery list than this is. So that's the style you can look into to really practice your letter shapes. But one that I like even more is foundational, which has a very nice round shape to it. That is quite pleasant. And that is, it's based on the Book of Kells, but this is a very nice round shape.
And the beauty of this is that you can really apply this to your everyday writing. I'm exaggerating the shape of these letters a little bit on purpose to give you a somewhat better view of why these are so... the shapes, the scale doesn't match. I just want to give you an idea. This should have been more rounded off. So, you know, as I said, I'm not a calligraphy expert, but as you can see, this really looks like a U, right? Even a cursive U. So you can really, and a cursive N, and a cursive O. So you can really practice, I think, your writing a lot with this. Now let's see if I can still do this one. It's been a while, but I really love the letter G for some odd reason in foundational. Now here we go. Perfection. I love that letter. Look at that. Look at how gorgeous this is. Look at that beautiful little twist. It's almost it's almost Arabic. In any case, these were just a few very simple pointers, and I will say again, don't take it from me. I'm not a handwriting expert. I'm not a calligraphy master. But these are just things I have done, exercises like that, keep going through it, and in the end that will improve your handwriting. So I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.